Hello, students. This article that I'm going to be discussing is called the Will You Sprint, Stroll, or Stumble into a Career in the New York Times in 2016. And I've used this article almost 10 years now. And many students of mine really appreciate this article because it really helps you understand all the different types of paths that students take while they're going through college. Sometimes they go through a slower path, which is like a wanderer, or a really slow path, the straggler, or they sprint through college, which they're called the sprinters. And there's three types of students that they identify in this article. So it's a transitionary period, and college, as some students probably already know this, is not for everybody, and sometimes it does take a little longer to get through college. I had a student years ago who told me, he was a much older student, and he told me that he'd actually come to TSU in the 1960s. But interesting enough, he he flunked out of TSU, and when he was about, I think maybe his first semester, possibly his first year as a freshman, he said that he had a lot of partying, he had a lot of good times, and he basically just really didn't do the work. But he got out of TSU, and after the 1 year flunk out, he started up a bunch of different businesses, and he worked for the U.S. Postal Service. Was fairly successful, relatively successful. He did well enough for himself. They decided close to about 45 years later, when he was probably about, I would say, maybe mid-60s, he decided to come back to TSU, finish up his college degree. And then once he finished it up, he was one of my students. He asked me for advice because he thought he would like to go for a master's degree. So he went for a master's degree and he graduated with that. And then he thought, you know what, maybe I'll go for a PhD. And he changed his mind after that. He decided it wasn't worth it. I mean, he was getting much older by that time. So he decided maybe it wasn't worth it because that might be a lot more time that he wanted to invest in. But the article is very helpful for many students because I've had students over the years who've taken time off, they've come back, then they maybe take some more time off, they go someplace else, they have a family situation, a work situation, and then they take their time. But it's not a bad thing. Sometimes people find their own paths in life. So the three types that the article identifies are the sprinters. Those who go, they sprint, literally sprint through college. They get done in 4 years flat. I was one of the sprinters, not to brag. But that just because you finish on time, it doesn't mean that your life becomes successful. It doesn't really work like that. For those students who've had me before, you know I've told a story about how I flunked out of law school. I went to law school for a year, and it did not work out. Clearly did not work out. That is how sometimes things work out. The wanderers, the graduates who are uncertain about their career paths, they kind of wander in, and sometimes you meet students like this. You know, maybe I'll be a communications major, or maybe a psych major, and then maybe I'll change my mind to a pre-law. And, you know, I myself changed my major 3 times in my freshman year. So I can understand that sort of, you know. But they go out, they come back after some time, and then they come unrelated job, they'll come back. The stragglers are the last type. Stragglers really have a tough time. So they start out really with getting things done and they want to get through college, but they may go through some kind of financial constraints, which does happen. If you owe money to TSU, for example, you can't get when you graduate, you can't get your transcript. There's a hold placed on your account, for example, financial hold. That financial hold means that you can't access that transcript if you want to get a job someplace. So there's students, for example, who they maybe leave, you know, maybe they move to a different state, and then they want to go to a different school. But the problem is, since they owe the old school, the previous school money, they have a financial hold, they can't leave. So that can happen also. And the article mentions that. It takes a lot of difficulty. So they don't get done. They have a lack of direction sometimes. You know, like I mentioned about being a psych major or English major, whatever, and then they change their minds. It can happen. I've had students, for example, who are like, oh, you know, I watched something on Law and Order, or I saw this great movie of FBI agents, and I really want to do that. And my first response is, have you been on a ride-along? You should consider doing a police ride-along. And they say, yeah, let me go try that. And they come back and like, yeah, this is not really what I want to do. And hey, you know what? You figured it out. I understand that. I actually wanted to be a police officer a long time ago. And I was in D.C. for college. And one semester I had a police captain who was the DC police captain, who was one of my professors. And he invited us to do internships at the DC Metro Police Department. So I did. I was there about 2 months. And I realized this is not the job I want to do. I don't think I could be a cop. So that was it. But I figured it out. That was not going to be for me. And that's kind of how it is for many professions. Now, the article talks a lot about, and bear in mind, the article is about almost 10 years old, but it's still a great article to read. I still endorse this article. There are key points that are really important. For example, the career paths that people take in life are not linear. For my own example, for example, I wanted to be a lawyer. In fact, I wanted to be a personal injury lawyer, the ambulance chaser. But that was not my destiny. And then eventually I wanted to be a law school professor. I knew that much. As students have heard me before, I am a third generation professor and educator on both sides of my family. So this is always how I was going to do things. Well, it didn't work out like that. I flunked out of law school. I was very discouraged, very depressed for a few months. And then I bounced back and went for my master's in public administration, which led to a PhD in public administration, which led me to come to TSU. So I sort of took a roundabout way to get what I wanted to do, which was being a professor. I did want to be a law school professor. But hey, being a public administration professor is actually not a bad job either. So I like that. Now, it's very normal for students to take different paths. And I've talked about this example before, that there's students who graduate with English major or maybe the history major, and they run a business. They start their own business. It's entirely possible. It's very possible to do that. They are different types of launches, the sprinter, the wanderer, the straggler, but they all work out. Eventually you get to your destination. Sometimes some people may take a little longer to get there. Some people get there faster, but eventually you're going to get to your destination. Now, of course, student debt matters. That makes a huge difference. As you guys may remember, during the Biden years, President Biden did try to get rid of the student loan debt. It was not easy, and he generally did not succeed. But that's kind of how it is, unfortunately. So for many students, look at it very carefully regarding the amount of debt you take on, because it's sizable. And debt, unfortunately, the student debt doesn't go away. Once you got it, it's kind of like you have it for a very long time. It's very difficult to get out of bankruptcy. Job hopping. Changing jobs in your early 20s, maybe late 20s, is very normal. It's actually very normal for many people to do that. The average American, they might have 9 different jobs and 6 different careers. So it's not abnormal, actually. Emerging adulthood. Okay, so, excuse me. This is very important for students to understand. It used to be that people would think, you're 18, you're an adult now. And that is legally true. But that's not entirely true, actually. For example, there are sometimes cases where people are not adults until they're about 30. Your brain changes over time. And you need to be able to have time to mature and develop, which doesn't really happen until about age 30, actually. So that period of time between 18 to 25, even 30, is actually now recognized more often as a time of exploration and growth, and not just some kind of immediate career success. Yes, there's always going to be prodigies, people who bust through college at age 14, and, sprinters that get done at 21, 22. But that doesn't always mean that's for everybody, and everybody develops on their own time. Now, this article is very important for many reasons, which I already discussed, but it's also because of students who have anxiety, especially some of you may be coming back to school after a long time, or you may have taken time off. That's okay. It should reduce your anxiety reading this article, which I highly encourage all students to read the articles. Don't just listen to my lectures on the video, on the channel, because it's not going to be enough. It promotes flexibility. This article allows students to really consider that, I got to try different things out. It's sort of like you don't know if you're going to like sushi or Chinese food or Italian food. You got to go try it out. You have to go try it out, and you probably may like it or you may not like it. But you have to try it out first. Like give you an example about when I tried to be a police officer. Financial realities. Okay, so as I mentioned before, student debt is lifelong. You can't get out of it. So make sure this is really what you want to do. And that's why it gets me to my next point, which the article does mention. It's internships. Go out, try to do an internship. Try to talk and network with people. Remember, the college degree is not going to be enough. The college degree is sort of like the bread on the sandwich. The meat, the cheese, all the other stuff, that is actually your networking, your internship value. The bread is there. We're going to give you the bread. But you got to make the sandwich also. Okay. Validates different experiences. That's something else I want to talk about. Whether you were in the military, or you took time off, or you were working in a different job and now you're coming back, or you're like my student who took 45 years and then they came back. That doesn't matter. Actually, you might have taken 50 years. Those experiences, sometimes I've noticed very often the older students tend to have a lot better life experiences that they can bring to the table than the younger students do. Not that that's a bad thing or a good thing, but I've noticed that. Um, this last thing I should say about this article. Think about the self-reflection. When you read this article, consider how it affects you. What is a good takeaway that you think about? That it's reflective of you in terms of how you've developed. If you think that maybe you're at a master's degree or coming to college, and there's a reason for that, it may help you understand better yourself and what you're looking for. Last thing, of course, don't stress. Everybody takes their own time, and that's okay. Sometimes you have to flunk out of law school like I did, and then you have to find a different path to get to your destination, which you want to do anyway. So that's also okay. It takes time. I think that's pretty much it, but if students have more comments, I'd love to hear about on the discussion board or in class.